So welcome to another war game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a brand new game from Multiman Publishing, and that is Storm Over Jerusalem, The Roman Siege. So this is a two-player area movement game that uses the Storm Over series. There's been a few titles of those.
This is our first
game
we've ever played of it.
Which is a semi-card-driven area impulse game. Mm-hmm. This one obviously covers the 709 siege of Jerusalem. So this is a kind of an ancients game.
I think it's 70 AD.
Is it 70 AD?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe.
I misread.
709.
709.
70.
They definitely weren't around then. But basically, the game sets up, it's a map of Jerusalem divided up into areas, and there's a big old ring of Romans around the side, and it is trying to get in and take over the city. This is a siege game. One of you will sit here and defend, and the other one will try their damnedest to get inside the walls.
Yeah.
That's what this one is, and that's what you can expect from it.
Yep. And I would say, I played the Judeans.
Yes.
The game is a little imbalanced in the regard. Your events are really amazing.
Yes.
And very, very hard to stop. Mine are a little more niche and can be really amazing, but only when you've got those certain cards in your hand.
Yeah, you have to I
almost
feel like
plan ahead.
Hand management was more important for the Judeans, because they have fewer cards as well.
Yep.
Whereas I felt like I was drawing 5 or 6 cards throughout the whole game, and
right.
I think I held on to one for a few turns to score some extra points, and everything else was like, we're going,
So I really think
out.
in the respect of the cards and the type of cards, the Romans have all the tricks. Let's be honest.
Yes.
They have battering rams, they have ballistas, they have things that cause and trigger famine.
Siege towers, siege
towers.
Ramps, everything offensive to break the walls, get over, and then get into the city.
So for the Judeans, it's really about trying, we talked about it a lot after we finished the game. It's about making the Romans take as much time as possible to breach the city, either spending a lot of time or a lot of blood. I would prefer the time. I think we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Although having you lose guys is almost unimportant because you have so many recruits or reinforcements coming up.
Yeah.
But you've got to be cognizant of that. You've got to make it cost.
I can't throw my troops away as such.
Right.
But I can throw more of them away.
And they're very hard to kill. The Romans are very hard to kill.
Yeah, to kill them outright. This is much more about forcing the Romans to run out of time.
Yeah.
You can outlast the siege. I think that's the much more likely way. If the Judean player is going to win, it's going to be through timing. Mm-hmm. And getting more victory points than the Romans is going to be tough.
It's going to be real hard.
The longer the game goes on, because they're just going to do so much attrition and taking of spaces and killing leaders and stuff. But this is a game of, here's my outside walls, and I'm going to defend and cause you to spend a bunch of time doing that, and then I'm going to pull back behind some secondary walls, and we're going to do it all over again.
Yep.
And I felt like I was under a time crunch. I felt like I was able to do a lot of things, but the things that frustrated me the most were when you were like, hey, I'm going to make you re-roll the dice, and they're going to fail.
Yeah.
And so now, I don't necessarily care that I didn't hurt you, or I didn't win a battle. It's that my guys are used up.
They're spent.
It's the spending of units, which is an equivalent of, that's your time.
Yep.
I've got fewer activations. I don't have time to do what I need to do with the turns I need to do it all.
Yeah.
That's where it hurt more than lose a guy. Okay. Half a victory point. I can make that back up.
Yeah.
I can't make up any more time in this game. So that was a very interesting. The dynamics of this game was something that we don't typically play with. Playing an ancient siege was also something that was new. Mm-hmm. We kind of talked about a few other siege games that we've played, and none of them are quite like this.
They're more modern.
Yes.
Modern siege games.
And so this was a neat piece of learning and history to interact with. I know there's a lot of people who do know about this. I remember when the game was first announced, and they were like, "Oh, storm over Jerusalem," and they were like, "Which one?" Because Jerusalem's been laid siege a number of times.
Well, is it the Crusades? Is it the Rome?
And which one?
That's very true.
So it was neat to kind of play around in this and to see kind of what this looks like, and the topography and the geography and the kind of hurdles that both sides faced when it came to this.
Yeah.
So that was enjoyable as well.
Well, and it was also, I think we said this a couple of times, we enjoyed what we were doing.
Yes.
The concept of managing your hand, managing your units, repairing walls, building siege towers, those kind of things were interesting and unique. And really for the Judeans, it's about managing your resources. Your resources are your scarce guys, right? You don't have anywhere near the number of Roman troops. And every time you repair a wall, you've got to
spend
a guy in that area. Now, you can repair that same wall multiple times for that one spent guy, but it's about making sure you have a guy there so you can repair that wall, making sure it takes you multiple turns to get through that wall. That's fun. And then it's about, like you said, falling back to the secondary tier of walls and understanding what weak points are. I will say one of the best things about the layout of the map are the areas and how they converge on certain points.
Yeah, it's like all games which are like area move or area impulse like this, the maps are always fascinating.
Yep.
Because the map is such an important part. It's not just, here's some geography and put a hex grid over it.
Right.
The way that they divide up areas, how many areas are adjacent to this other one, and then when you get into that one, what does that look like going out of it? All of that stuff is very interesting. There are certain parts of the map where you're like, oh man, this is a trap.
Yeah, it is.
or there's parts where you're like, cool, this is undefendable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to waste my soldiers. I'll cede that to you because what's beyond that is very difficult for you to take.
Yeah.
And recognizing that and playing with that is a whole extra layer that these types of games have that I really like as well.
And I think that comes with experience. So an example I'll kind of point out on the north side of the city here, you've got an area called New City. Then you've got a New City Northeast and a New City Northwest. New City can be attacked by 3 different areas with Romans. New City Northwest can only be attacked by 2 different areas with Romans. So this is your weak point.
New City is very vulnerable.
It is your weak point. So knowing that, you've got to move a couple of extra troops in there. But once again, you don't want to get caught out in the open. So you need to understand, okay, I'm gonna hold this for a round or 2. I'm going to leave a guy there just so you can't walk in. And then I'm going to fall back to the inner wall. And then that inner wall becomes another trap, like you said, for the Romans. This one can only now be attacked by 2 different spots. So it's a matter of...
And only one of those is from when those guys got in.
Right.
And your stacking limit then becomes your enemy.
Yep,
the Romans.
Stacking limit of the Romans is 5, right? The Judeans can do 6. So it's key to understand, okay, I can really defend this area, right? This is a real bad spot for the Romans. This is a real bad spot for the Romans, and you need to understand that.
Yeah.
While also understanding the southern part of the city, the Romans cannot build siege towers.
Yes.
I don't know if that's because there's too high a topography there. I'm not sure.
It was too rough of terrain out there.
So they just couldn't get them up. So because of that, I don't need necessarily 3 guys on the south side of the city.
Well, and it was also, with the setup, I set up with more guys in the north and fewer in the south. And so it was like, oh, I should, you're off to the races in the north already.
But understanding that for the Judeans, managing those troops, okay, I'm going to send 1 troop from these 3 areas up here to kind of gum this up. And then you've obviously got to protect Temple Mount, and you got to protect, what's this one called? I can't remember.
Herod's
Palace. Those are victory point areas. The longer the Judeans hold those, the more victory points they're going to get.
Yep.
When the Romans take those over, I don't get a victory point, and
I
you
still
get a
don't
victory point.
And if I take both, game's over.
Game's over.
So you can't lose both of them.
And that's very possible.
Yes.
If I am careless as the Judeans, it's very possible that could be over in the first couple of rounds. So you got to be cagey about it, and I like that concept.
Well, and then you get into Roman tactics of like, okay, those are such a big threat. Do I just constantly siege those two areas to force those into kind of meat grinders, and it sucks up all of your guys from elsewhere that opens up other areas for me to get in? There's so much to consider tactically in this game.
I agree, but remember, the Judeans, anytime they hold areas, 12 through 31, which is the entire city, as long as the Romans haven't breached those walls, they get an extra victory point. Yeah. So, as the Romans, I feel like you've got to get in there.
But can I
in turn
bleed
2
you
or 3?
Yep,
I get it.
Sap those to make
and then
that
make
easier.
Yeah,
that was what was so cool about this game.
Yeah,
is that the rules are like 5 pages. Yeah. This was really easy to learn.
And frankly,
this blade
was excellent.
I mean,
it had everything you need. I never had a question, even after reading these. I'm like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
So very good there. But you're correct.
But the tactics of it were
the mechanics are easy. The tactics are really where the depth is.
And it's like, the more you play around with it, the more you're like, ooh, that's really important. Or like, I could do this here.
Yep.
And a lot of heavily defensive games, I think, suffer from not having enough of that.
Sure.
They're like, oh, there's a little bit of it, and so they can often seem like you're not doing anything.
You have to give the defender something to do as well.
Yes.
And I felt like I had a lot to do.
Yes.
I had to worry about certain areas. I had to readjust my men. I had to figure out where to use my leaders. Boy, I'm going to be honest, that leader part, that was really interesting. I thought that was, in my opinion, the best part of the design.
It was such an interesting... I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that, where you can do so much with your leaders, like options-wise.
Yeah, they had a whole bunch of actions.
And it's like, you can place them out and stuff.
Yep, they can give a benefit to attack. They can give a benefit just as defense. You can also do common enemies. So you could make the 2 different factions, units in the same area, work together. Now, I only did that once, and it didn't work as well as I wanted it to. That's something you're going to want to do.
I think
once you've congested
late game, when it's like, okay, these are the dregs of the guys,
and I might bust out and attack the Romans, hoping to kill a couple of guys. But that other one that was so important was the rally. Throw them in an area, flip 3 guys over. That allows me to then do some counterattacking, because once those Roman troops are spent,
they're much more vulnerable.
That's where you're going to do your damage.
You get those light troops, and they do their range attacks against them.
Now, it's hard. You got to have 5 or 6.
But at worst, you force some retreats.
Yeah.
That hurts me.
It does, because you have to move.
It's a time.
It does. I really liked... I also liked that I had to place them before the end of each turn, or you got a victory point. For each one of them.
That wasn't playing. That was the most interesting part. I've never seen anything like that.
And I still sit here and I'm thinking about it, but that was actually genius.
Yeah.
It was genius to do that.
Like, you're forced or encouraged to use them. Like, hey, you've got these, use them.
And you're encouraged to not necessarily put them in harm's way, but when you use them, you're putting them in harm's way. There's no way around it.
And if you lose them, very bad.
Well, because then that automatic victory point, because I can't place a dead leader.
Yes.
He's dead. He's out of the game. Every turn he doesn't get placed, you're gaining a VP.
Yeah.
And that happened. In round 3, I think my guy died.
I killed one of them.
You got a couple VPs, and then it was over because you... But that was a really interesting thing. Now, the Romans didn't have leaders.
Nope. None of it.
So that was one advantage I did have. And I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, you're like, I can toss in for an extra +2 on defense or a +1 on attack, the other way around.
And one time, I think early on, I caught you with 4 Roman guys adjacent to my wall near the Temple Mount. And I had 5 guys. I threw my leader. Oh, no, I had 3 guys that could do range.
Yeah, I had 2 flipped over guys.
2 flipped over. And I had my 3 and I threw my leader down. All of a sudden I'm a 5 rolling 2d6, hoping to get a 10 or higher. And I got 4 hits on you, and that killed both your guys.
Of them.
And that was really key because that gave me a victory point, and it also lost you 2 guys.
And I'm now like, don't have anything there. And I'm like, that's not great.
And if I had a unit, I could have gone over the wall, opened that area up, and got another supply point.
Yes.
Which was, I didn't think I wanted to do that because I think you would have killed me. But I could have done that.
Yes.
But that was a good use and interesting use of that leader. Very unique. I'm actually still blown away by that because I'm like, wow, that was really kind of cool.
Yeah,
very well done.
There's some really interesting nuance to this game. I think about like the passing element of it.
Yep.
Where if the Roman passes, the turn will end. If the Judean player doesn't discard a card.
Right.
So, like, if the Judean player wants to turn to keep on going because there's some things they want to do, they have to lose a card and then they can take an impulse.
Yeah.
And so that might sound like a punishment, but also, especially early in the game, most of the time they're happy with the turn ending because they're going to pick up some VPs for the stuff they control, as long as they've placed their leaders.
Yeah.
And so it's this... That aspect, it was so interesting because I'm like, I'm trying to do as much as I can, and then try to pass before you've used your leaders, but I've done enough for it to have been satisfactory as a turn.
Well, and
there was some really interesting aspects of that.
The Romans are against the clock, so you don't want to be doing that until it's later in each turn.
But and in those first couple of turns, I was trying to force you to like. I was waiting until you had not many cards left, or you had no cards. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm in control of when this turn ends now. Mm-hmm. Because if you have no cards, you can't extend the turn anymore. Right. That was also interesting when I'm like...
But like you said, it's a risk. It's a risk for the Romans to do that. Because there's times I just want the turn to be over.
Yeah.
And there were a couple cards. I think I had one card that... And it was give you 4 victory points and end the round, which I'm like... That's not good. No. I don't want to give you more VP than I have to. But at the right time...
If I pass to try and game you, you're like, nah, it's over.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, I get 4 VPs from that, but also I lose a turn, which is like...
Yeah.
So you have, like, there's an element to this game where it's like, you can try to do some kind of like gamey bits to it, but it can also... There is always a risk that it backfires pretty significantly, which I think... I appreciate that in a game as well, because having some of that of like, ooh, I'm going to like try to be cute about it, and then it's like, no.
Yeah.
I like that in a game as well.
Another thing I was really impressed by was the walls, right? So the walls have boxes, and they say +4 in them.
Yep.
So anytime the Romans assault across that wall, the Judeans get a +4 bonus to their defense, unless the Romans have siege towers.
Yeah, those detract from that.
Yeah, so if you have a 2 siege tower, a level 2 siege tower, my wall now becomes 4 -2. It only gives me a +2 bonus. So that really encourages you to build 2 or 3 siege towers.
Which is very slow.
Well, it is.
It uses me cards.
It uses your cards, yep.
So there's always that stuff to consider.
Yep.
But then what I also really liked was that as I assault successfully over walls...
It damages a wall.
The walls take attrition. They'll get damaged and damaged, and you can repair them back.
But you can never go above 3, and they started at 4.
Yeah.
So that's a big hit.
They'll never be as good as they were.
And I remember the first couple turns, I was like, oh, this is going to be... I was thinking to myself, this is going to be pretty easy defending this. And then I realized, all you had to do was 1 damage to me, and that wall took a hit. And then I couldn't get it back to 4. So managing those, I thought, was very interesting. Trying to keep those
and all
repaired.
Of that stuff made it feel very siege-like.
Yep, it did.
Right. I think it's very easy to make a game where you're like, I don't know, we just put some high numbers and like, I don't know, it just feels like a regular war game.
Yeah.
But in this one, I felt significantly like it was like how many assaults did I launch in this game, right?
Yeah.
It's that attrition of wave after wave.
Yeah.
Let's build more siege engines. Let's get the battering rams out.
The siege ramps, those were very cool.
Like all of these things that you're trying to do again and again, pounding the walls.
Yep.
And then finally you make a breakthrough, only to find there's another layer of walls.
Sure.
But like, it felt like I was laying siege to an area, trying to get into the city, at which point then we're going to run riot. But
yeah,
I was rewarded from this game in that I felt like I was doing very siege-like things.
Sure.
Which I appreciated. And they didn't miss the mark on that, which was nice.
Yeah, and I even thought some of the cards, so if you had a battering ram, there were certain cards called firebrands that I could outright cancel that.
Yep, you just set fire to them.
Nope, they're on fire. But I had to have that card, and I think early on I used one of these on your siege towers because it killed a couple levels of siege towers, which was nice. But I think I would have rather had them when you did the. Now that I know that
the siege, the battering rams are very strong if you can roll well.
Well, because you have to roll a 3, 4, 5, or 6, and they crush the wall.
I messed up the first one, but the second one I
rolled a 1. So I liked that the cards had some of that. There's almost a counter to, not everyone, but a good counter to a good amount of those cards. So it is evened out in some ways.
But it's that is also an aspect that ensures that this stays grounded as a game.
Yeah.
It is a game. You have a hand of cards.
And you're rolling
Some of those
dice.
cards are going to be like, ha-ha, and then some of them are going to be like, no.
Yeah.
And you're playing some cards, chucking some dice, and it feels like a game still.
Yep.
And there are gamey things that you do, so I'm not getting lost in the drudgery of an extremely dry and complicated simulation. This was a game, and I enjoyed the back and forth of what we were doing.
Definitely, and there's a lot of moments where you have some and some crap.
A lot of like,
So it's a game, and I like that. I like that there's some chance to it. I like that there's dice rolling, and it's not a guarantee that you're going to do what you want to do. In fact,
no, not even.
How many times did I roll poorly?
Yes,
and that's okay. It's part of the game.
Or you roll, and then you play that one card that's like re-roll. You're like,
yeah.
I had enough.
The other thing about the siege mechanic is the supply part is pretty interesting.
Yes,
you're gonna continually put up supply restrictions, which is tracked on the
I put up some palisades, and so supplies can't get into the city.
So what that means is every round, based on the level of that supply restriction, I'm gonna have to roll a die to determine how many of my areas don't get refreshed. And it's usually 1 or 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, early game, 1 or 2.
It can get really bad.
And that's it. And the longer that game goes on, the fewer the fewer spaces you have, the more restrictions there are. That's gonna kill you.
Oh yeah.
It can be crippling if that goes up high. And your territory shrink, and it's like, you can't refresh anyone. There's no supplies left.
Yep.
Great theme in it as well.
Well, and it's also very hard. The Judeans really can't stop that, right? They can't, like the palisades you put up there, I had no cards that would destroy them.
No, and I don't think there was any counter to it, even when I played the card.
The only way that I could potentially open up supply lines was to counterattack you in an area outside.
But like that's also
that's dangerous.
Very risky.
So that felt thematic, and I could feel that pinch coming down near the end of the game, and that was cool. I still think I played the game totally wrong. Not
it's
mechanically, tactically. I should have held on for 1 or 2 rounds at the outside walls, fallen back to the pinch points here, and here. And just forced you to basically slam against the walls time and time again.
It becomes a timing game halfway through where you're like, I just have to hang on. How can I waste your activations? How can I, I'll just shoot some arrows just to flip a couple guys. Because a couple guys gone means that your assault is going to be much less strong. And you can only assault from this one area. And so the game seems very precarious all the time, but I think you can help yourself
Yeah.
the further it goes on, but it will always have this element of tension and hopelessness where you're just like, it just doesn't look or
Yeah.
feel good. It's like, oh no.
I'm going to come out and say it. My guess is the Romans win a majority of this, but I think the Judeans can definitely win. Is it going to be often? Probably not, but you can definitely win.
Yeah.
By cagey play and a little bit of luck thrown in there, you can hold it. It's going to come down to, I won by a victory point or two, but
Yes.
that's okay. It doesn't matter.
But I think that's, it's going to be a tight game a lot of the time.
Yeah.
If you get to the end of victory points anyway.
It's only an 8-turn game.
Yes.
And I had an event as the Judeans that I could have moved that up by giving you some victory points, but
getting it to a 7-turn game
it's totally different than an 8-turn game.
Very tough for the Romans to.
I would agree.
So then your tactics just totally change.
Yep.
You're like, I'm just going to kill guys.
Yep.
I'm just going to get victory points from attrition. That's all
Sure.
I care about. Because it's unlikely I'm going to get anything else.
And that's going to be one of those cards I think you're going to have to hold on to till turn 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Then play it almost as a booby trap.
You can assess where you're at. And you're like, okay, I can afford to play this. Yeah. Let's go.
And then hold.
A lot of really neat stuff in this game.
Yeah, I liked it.
I'll show you how it works, and then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. If you've played an area impulse game, you might be at least somewhat familiar with the kind of the format of the map. We do have a turn track and this supply track and a couple little tables over here, but the majority of the map is this walled Jerusalem, and then there's this kind of outer ring outside of it, and there's all these different kind of subsections, and everything on the map is divided up into areas. We call these area moves. The areas are all numbered, 1 through 31, I think. 1 being over here, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and so that's a way to identify areas. Like, it'll say, hey, this through this is inside the city, this through this is not. If you control areas 33 and 19, you're going to get extra cards. It's just kind of a shorthand, so you don't have to go to all of the names of everything and fish those out. You'll notice that the numbers also have a color assigned to them, kind of this green and this yellow and this red. That corresponds to this little terrain effects table, which is just off camera that you can't see. But basically, green is not particularly much terrain in any form or fashion. You get +1 defense. Yellow is +2 defense, and red is +3 defense. And that's for the defender if they control that area. If it's contested, neither side gets it. And one of the big things in this game is, all of that will be very familiar to people with who've played Area Impulse. The big thing about this is that this is a full-blown siege game. So the game starts with this ring, every space occupied by Romans, and all the Judeans in their 2 factions, John and Simon, the blue and purple, are all inside. And they're surrounded by this very large, very strong outer wall. There is also these inner walls as well, so there's multiple layers of walls that the Romans are going to have to get through. But the walls also, as you assault across them, give a +4 to start with. And as in true siege fashion, the more that you assault or the more that you build siege towers, you can temporarily negate some of that with siege towers, or as you do assaults, or as you play certain cards, you can damage the walls and you can reduce them permanently in the sense that a siege tower for that assault makes this only a +2 and not a +4, as opposed to this wall is always a +3 whilst this mark is on it. This happens as damage is done through doing assaults or card play. You can eventually breach the walls and everyone can just kind of pour in. And then once you control this area, now my guys can just come across, even though it's a plus. Like normally they can't come across that way, or they need some penalty. They can just walk on into this area specifically. Can't come into this one, for example, but they can come into these ones. But that's the way that this game functions, is that you're going to have a hand of cards, and the Romans start with a hand of 6 cards, and that's their hand limit, and they have their own separate deck. And the Judean player, technically on the turn track, they have a hand of 3 cards, but you draw +1/+1 from controlling these 2 areas. So towards the end of the game, if you lose either one of those, you're not going to draw these extra cards, and also you're going to be drawing, instead of 3, 2 towards the end, it says on the turn track. And so you're going to have you're going to have fewer units as the game progresses, fewer areas to activate, but you'll also typically have fewer cards if things go kind of poorly for you. And the game is alternating activations, and on your turn, on your impulse, you can either play a card and kind of do what it says, or you can spend it. The Romans spend this little red number to build that many points of siege towers. This is a 1, it's not great for it. This is a 3. It's a very strong card, but you could also build either a 2 and a 1 if you needed to, or you could build a 3 and nothing else, or you could build 3 1s. You can't build siege towers on this kind of south front. The terrain just didn't allow that. Basically, it was too rough. You couldn't get the siege machines there. And there's little markers on the map to remind you, hey, you can't do that there. So you can either do that, or you can do the events and just kind of you do what it says, and it'll allow you to break some rules or do some extra attack, things like that, or supplement things. Or in a majority, I don't know, maybe not a majority, but I feel like 50% at least of what you're going to be doing is unit activations. And what you do in a unit activation is that you pick an area and you're going to activate units in that area. And you're going to activate some or all of the units in that area to either move, or to attack, or to assault. If we're going to pick up a couple units here, so the values on these, on the right-hand side, top to bottom, we have attack, or firepower, as they call it in this one, at the top. In the middle is their defense value, and then at the bottom is their movement factor. The number in the black circle, that's their setup area, and that's all that is. So when you attack in place. And so typically speaking, someone has to have assaulted into an area, not across a wall. If these guys were here and they had assaulted into here on the previous turn, like the previous turn on the turn track, we've all refreshed. You can do an attack here because they can all attack each other. The other type of attack you can do is you can attack one adjacent with your light infantry only. So these guys that have little spears on them, they can do ranged attacks. Other than that, it's kind of melee in place. Moving, spend your movement points to move that many areas. You have to kind of stop when you meet enemies, but these guys over here, they've got 2 movement. They can move 1 up here and then 2 into here through this wall breach, for example. If those guys weren't there, we could go 1, 2, move over here. Or you can assault. And assault is a combination of those. You move 1 space, you only move into an adjacent area, and then you do an attack. If your attack fails, you have to move back to where you came from, though. But if you succeed, you get to stay in the area that you took, basically. So what does an attack look like? Well, we'll do an assault just to kind of say that we did it. So an assault, again, you activate this area, we're going to move in, and we're going to do an assault here. So any kind of an attack, be it assault or an attack, you're going to add up all your firepower as the attacker. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 7, and we're going to add to that 2d6. The defender, you pick the highest defense value. So this one is an 8, and we're going to add to it because at the beginning of the turn we controlled this. Where's my little control markers? They're in the box, but the little control marker, right? It's kind of on there. So we're going to get a defensive terrain there. So we're going to get 8 plus 2, and that makes 10. So how this is you're going to add to the firepower 2d6. The defender's going to add nothing to it. So 10 is kind of easier to beat, but that's where, trying to keep the Romans out or retreating so they have to attack across these +4 walls is very, very important. So we had 7 plus 2d6, and we'll just roll the 2d6. Great, we rolled another 7, so we got 14 compared to the opponent's 10. So that means we do 4 hits. And 4 hits, there's a little menu of what you can do with your hits, but effectively you can flip for 1 and you can retreat for 1. So we can go 1, 2, 3, and then retreat a guy. He can't go. Yeah, he can go in there. He's not overstacked. 4. Or we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, because we want to leave a full strength guy there because they get worse when they're flipped. So we could do that. And all of these people who attacked are now spent. They go onto their spent side. And that's what attacking looks like. You will throw a lot of dice in this game. There's options for like playing cards and stuff. So for example, the Judean card here, this one, play after any Roman roll, the Roman has to re-roll, and they have to keep the second result. So you're like, okay, well, let's make you re-roll. Hey, you rolled into much worse, so you only have 11 instead of 14. So instead of all of that happened, I've just got to flip 1 guy only. That looks much better, right? So there's card play and things like that you can do to enhance things. The Romans have similar options. If you force someone to retreat, you can play Roman brutality to kill them instead. Little bits and pieces like that. But this is a game of moving and attacking, and you're doing it over and over and over again to try to break through these outer walls and make some headway into the city as the Romans. They're really up against the clock. And something we talked about is the map itself. Some of attacking out here into this section of the map is quite easy because you're going to have options to do 1, 2, 3 different assaults, albeit different parts of the wall, into this one area. So your defenders here are going to take lots of damage very quickly. So you can turn this into a meat grinder, or you can just sack it, because here you can have a stacking limit of 5, 10, 15 units. They can't all go in here. Only 5 can go in here, so all your 15 units are now all of a sudden kind of useless. And they can only attack into this area to make this kind of progress. Obviously they can clear out these areas too, but how you move and how this map is drawn up is fascinating. And the Judean player really has to pick that balance of what do they desperately want to hold, or what is delaying tactics to hold off a few rounds, pull back to our much stronger defense lines with the +4 and a +3, and you can harry them with your ranged attacks once they're spent, because these guys are a lot weaker. There's so much to consider in this one. This section of the board starts off with only a couple troops in each one. It's kind of weak, but as the game progresses, you'll use all your reinforcements, bring all these guys on and make good headway, and then the Judean player might be focusing on defending some of this stuff, but all of a sudden all of these extra reinforcements come on down here, and now this isn't just, it's not just trying to keep your opponent honest. This is now some real threat down here as well, if you've drained your forces to try and fight this. So it's a really, really neat siege game, and it feels very siege-like. You can build little siege ramps, you can play battering ram cards to try to roll a die to just smash through, but there's counters to those. You can roll onagers, there's catapults, which you can either throw to try to damage units, or you can attack the walls to destroy those as well. Building the siege towers, and then the Judean player trying to counter the siege towers with their firebrands, trying to rebuild the walls, but you have to spend units to do that. It's really wonderful, and it takes time to make progress, and as such, it feels very siege-like, the things that you're doing. Assaulting again and again, once more into the breach. Let's build another siege tower. My siege tower's not strong enough, let's make it a bigger one, and now we're going to go in, and then it's the attrition, and then we finally break through, and it's like, oh, I got to go again and again. It's a really neat race against the clock, as well as trying to defeat your opponent as well. But that's kind of how this game works, back and forth, trying to out-activate people, trying to be canny about when and where you play your Judean leaders. That's not the leaders. This guy's the leader. Once they die. You're going to lose points for that. Very, very intense. So that was a look at the map, and what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the board.
Beautiful game, by the way. Really well
very
produced.
Nicely produced. Are these 1-inch counters, I think?
Yep, they are. They're big, and they look great. I love them.
Yes, and the
cards are great.
Little linen finished cards with their little kind of sepia artwork on them.
Yep.
But this was again our first foray into the Stormover series.
I want to get the other games.
Yes,
frankly.
and isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah,
right.
About
like,
getting more games.
I've learned this. I've learned the series.
Yep.
Rules. Like, it's not complicated.
Nope.
I presume the core of moving and card play and attacks is similar enough. Where I want to play some other ones in this.
Oh yeah.
They got Dien Bien Phu is highly recommended. They got Stalingrad. They got all sorts of older ones.
Arnhem.
Like,
so,
this was really enjoyable.
Oh yeah.
And there's just like, there are so many things. As we sat down after we played this and kind of deconstructed it, it was like, oh man.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to consider in
lot
of the stuff that we did do or didn't do, and it was like, oh man, it was intense.
It was.
At times where you're like, okay, if I'd have done this and this.
Yep.
And that's also something that I love in wargaming.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like playing the games, but I also like to go back and assess of like, okay, how do we mess this up?
Sure.
And then like, what could I do better?
Yep.
And those second and third plays of games are always so much more dynamic.
If we replayed this immediately, the outcome would be totally different.
Yes.
I would have held on to other cards. I would have put up more of a delaying withdrawal. I would have made you pay for things a little more. I wouldn't have. I got careless there at the end because I was like, I got to take you out. The reality is, I didn't need to take you out.
You need to move everyone back.
I needed just to fall back.
That's done with.
Force you to do your actions and burn yourself out.
Yeah.
And I messed up, but that's okay. I learned, right? I'm going to play it totally differently next time, and I'll do much, much better.
And then you're going to switch sides, and it's a very different game.
Yep, absolutely.
It's what you're trying to do, and you just get to explore different tactics. I had a good time doing this. It was a very different, again, I'll say this, a very different style of game than we normally play.
Yeah.
But it was like, here's some card play, here's some dice chucking, here's some units, we're going to calculate some values.
Yep.
It was really easy to learn.
Yep.
So if this is something that you are interested in,
and
you should check this out.
If you like any Roman style game, this is a must play.
Yeah, if you like Ancients, you probably already have this.
Because it's pretty unique.
But yes, I wanted to say a big thanks to MMP for getting us a copy of this.
They gave us this copy.
Very generous of them to do so, so appreciate that.
Yep.
But now it's like, okay, I got to go on Noble Knight Games and look at some of the other ones.
Don't we always do that? Well, and there's several Stormover series games that are like in Against the Odds magazine.
Yeah, there's magazine
one
ones
over
and stuff.
Tiserhung. There's one over, what was the other ones that
Was Normandy a mag one as well?
There were several. I'm like, well, we need to do it. I love learning a new series. I love being exposed to new series because if they connect with you, there's a whole host of games that you can try.
I like area impulse games as well. I just think they're an interesting style of game. The one thing I would say about this one is the box says it's low solitaire suitability, and they're pretty much right.
Well, because the cards, right?
So much of it is card play that's hidden, but also like the whole passing and initiative mechanics.
That's a big part of it.
Fudge that very well.
Yeah.
Unless it involves like a lot of dice rolling. I would love to see one make a bot for this, though.
I would think that you could come up with a rule and just kind of have the cards in your hand, maybe flip one for the opponent, and
I'd like to see someone do it.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah,
this would.
It would be a great solo game.
Yeah, I'm sure somewhere someone could make this into a great solo game.
I would think you could do it. You don't look at the opponent's cards and you just flip one. And if they can take the action, they take the action. If they don't, they just do but
I don't.
It's almost playing
I would love
two-handed.
to see someone do it, or if you like, But
anyway,
yes,
we could go on. But
you get yourself another player.
Definitely would be a good two-player game. Yeah, that's what it's.
I think
made
that's
for.
where that's the joy of it as well. It's the card play back and forth and trying to outwit each other with things and feinting here and there. But yeah, Storm Over Jerusalem from MMP,
Brand spanking new.
Brand spanking new.
Just came out.
Check this out if you're interested. Appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.